Well, welcome back, everyone, to Assuring Autonomy. This has been a great interview series, and it gets better today. We are really, really fortunate to have two of LA's finest. The LA Fire Department is here in the house. Battalion Chief Richard Fields is joining us today, and as well as firefighter David Danielson, who is also a drone pilot. Two very, very experienced public servants. Gentlemen, you don't know me very well, but those who do know, my son's a trained firefighter, makes his living now as a paramedic, and also is a Part 107 certificated drone pilot. So I feel like we've got a lot of common connections here. But you're doing really, really exciting stuff in LA, and we're dying to hear about it and help keep that momentum building in the public safety community, thanks to leaders like yourselves. So, Chief, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about why you're excited about this, what the genesis for the program is, and how you see it adding value to your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight our program, to talk about it. I'm very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and even more proud of the team that we've built around our program. It's really the engine behind our successes and us being a program of example in the public safety space. This really started as a really small kind of exploratory project back in 2015. The fire department went through a major reorganization to better serve the public. The deputy chief at the time was a definite out-of-the-box thinker, and I had been involved in some other tech projects for the fire department, and my interest in tech is not necessarily the tech itself, but us doing our jobs better, more efficiently, obviously focusing on keeping our firefighters safe. It's really kind of the idea behind bringing in UAS. So we pitched the idea to my boss, and we were going to use it in a small platform, maybe some post-incident analysis, and I did a little homework on the drones themselves, knew nothing about the drone industry. It just so happened that our fire chief and his staff had gone to Firehouse World and looked at and saw a mock-up of a drone on top of a command rig. And because he saw a mock-up of that, I was able to present to the senior leadership the idea of introducing drones into the public safety space. And that was really the beginning of it. It just grew from there, and it grew to something that had major implications for the entire fire department. And then obviously, looking 5 years, 6 years later, major implications for the entire fire service. But we made it a point, when we started to really walk slow, when I spoke to my bosses, that I could articulate, this really unknown technology to make them feel comfortable with allowing us to continue to pursue it. And the best way to do that, that our pilots or our program really needed to be built following the template of manned aviation. Manned pilots felt comfortable with what a drone pilot was doing, then it was going to have some success. And then I think that pretty quickly led me to Dave, and I'll let him talk a little bit. I'll tell you right now, he's going to say only about a tenth of his. He's very terrible at letting you know what he does. But I sometimes I call him chief because he was a chief in the military, and so he really outranks me. But his level of expertise on the flight line and what it means to create a safe and consistent aviation environment was critical to how we built the program. That there is no difference between a manned pilot and an unmanned pilot for LAFD in the level of professionalism, preparation, pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight, documentation, and the attitude toward flying. We've established one of the pillars of our program is that you are a pilot, putting an aircraft into national airspace, period. From the outside, as well as members involved in our program, this is not a hobbyist program. You're a professional. And when you have this badge and patch on representing Los Angeles City Fire Department operating a UAS, then it has to be at that level of professionalism at all times.
Yeah, I love that clarity, Chief. I really do. And we love our hobbyists, and a lot of folks do both, right? Some of us fly for fun and fly professionally. But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think the smartest thing that the FAA did when they brought in Part 107 was they used the term remote pilot in command, which we all know as aviators know is a legal term, pilot in command. You're legally responsible for the safe conclusion of the flight, and legally responsible for what's going on with that flight at all time. So if I could, can we shift over? I'd love to hear from Dave. How, I know you did some really interesting things in the Navy. Did you fly drones in the Navy, or was that just, did you use the training that you had from the Navy and then bring that in? How did you bring that to the flight line for LAFD?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. The background on my naval career is I actually retired 26 years in 2017 from the Naval Reserves with a combination of active duty. My entire career, I was a naval air crewman, helicopter crew chief. For those aware of military aviation training programs, the crew chiefs, part of the air crew with the pilots, are really vested in standardization, flight safety, operational risk management, crew resource management. So these were programs that I was very much in tune with as an instructor. So, coming into LAFD, it was a very easy transition to take that language, bring it over to our chief pilot at our air operations, and discuss how we're going to build the UAS program in parallel with our air operations. Absolutely, as Chief illuminated, I mean, those first few years of building policy, building operations manuals, ultimately what led to developing our approval for our FAA certificate of authorization, it was key to ensure that we had those things implemented. And today I can tell you the pilots that we have trained are really embracing that aeronautical decision-making and, the concepts we learned of ORM, CRM, all of that. What I found is, it's so important that as we've built our program, and thanks to our leadership, they all see the value in developing that standardization because it fits right into our firefighter culture. The point of that is that we have to keep reaching out. We can't build our program in a bubble. So key to that was us really establishing a relationship with the FAA. I recently communicated with Chief Fields that I had got picked up by the FAA's Fast Team Representation Program. The public safety agencies may or may not be aware of that as the regulations are changing, it looks like the FAA is moving everything into the Fast Team website and the Wings program. Well, guess what? That a lot of what's in there, exactly what the manned aircraft airspace is using for continued education, it's exactly where UAS needs to live as well. So it fits really well with what we've built here. It feels like we're moving very well in parallel with what the FAA's mission and safety is.
So you've done this the right way, and tell me about the firemen on the line. How's it helping them? Give us some examples of how you're using it as a tool, probably on a daily basis, I would imagine.
I would love to say that we're true, Brian. The reality is early on, because we're taking a very conservative approach, everything we do, every mission set, it's not reactive. We are looking at mission profiles. What is the right way to approach? But I will say early on, 2017, as you recall, was a major wildfire year for us. Here in Southern California, our very first official flight was when the 405 freeway going through Sepulveda Pass was completely engulfed in fire. We had, a good solid day of intense firefighting. And then on the second day, we deployed the drones with FAA approval into the temporary flight restricted area. That day, we proved a lot of things. One, the drones can be deployed. Two, we can function in a multi-aircraft environment. We deconflicted with our air operations as they were flying at altitude to deliver water and to refuel. We picked an air space that was deconflicted with our hel attack leadership, our HELCO, our helicopter command, overseeing like an air boss for the whole thing. So we used the drones for surveying the burn area. We identified hotspots using thermal imaging. This is all back in 2017 when these things were just getting proven. You know, we got the opportunity to go out there, and between myself, my co-lead Derek Ward, we hit the ground running. So yeah, in cases like that, brush fire, absolutely. It's of a value for mapping the burn area. You're reducing the amount of potential injury on firefighters because they're not having to traverse the terrain to map with GPS. And literally in minutes, we're doing orthomosaics of acreage, which is huge. Just giving that basic aerial situational awareness helps the incident commander determine what resources they need to be using. And what's even amazing is because you have that photogrammetry or that photo imagery, now the incident commander can objectively close out a fire or pass responsibility, which is, you know, it's a very effective tool. It's a very efficient tool. The final piece on that, I would say, is, you know, the sky's the limit on what we can do. Anything that gives us an aerial advantage where we can see, you know, from a position that may be obstructed by ground. I would use the example like today, in a rare time of our year, we're getting rain, right? So our LA river basins get full. And unfortunately, because of our homeless population, we could have victims stranded out there. And using a drone with thermal imaging that is able to function in that type of climate is a huge advantage to quickly get the resources where they need to go. So that's just two small case examples. We're using it for, you know, supporting arson and investigation, hazmat. We put gas sensors and chemical sensors on the drone systems to detect industrial inspection, brush inspection. I mean, like I said, the sky's the limit.
Now, you raise an interesting point. I don't know if it was the 405 incident, but, you know, there have been a number of times when air ops have had to be shut down because of drones being flown by people who weren't supposed to be in that particular area. Chief, how is that viewed now from your point of view inside the department? It's kind of been a tale of two cities. Drones are a good tool, but they've also been disruptive in some instances, if not used the right way. I know communication with the community is really, really important to this program. How do you see that today? Have we gotten a better understanding out there among the hobbyists that want to know what's going on, that they can be disruptive, and kind of gotten that separation now, or we still got work to do?
Yeah, to answer the question directly, yeah, we definitely have work to do. I was driving home a couple of days ago through downtown Los Angeles, and on the corner of Broadway and First, I'm watching a guy launching his drone. You know, a civilian, probably, you know, a private citizen. It's the shiny new toy. It still is.
Yeah.
And as the technology continues to grow, the capabilities are more, the ability for it to fly, and the majority, I would say the majority of the pilots out there, particularly the hobbyists, and the large majority of those people are just your average person that went to a hobby store, thought it was cool, and got not particularly using it for a purpose, a business or anything like supporting a business or anything like that. Their understanding of flight, most people that come into the drone world are not previous aviators. They don't have experience in that. So they just rely on the systems that are on the drone. They know it's easy to fly. And there really is nothing that says, hey, you know what? It's probably best that you hold off and understand, just like you would if you got behind the wheel of a car. Before you could drive, you have to understand the rules of the road. You have to practice. You have to be observed operating that vehicle. We need to be there when it comes to drones. And as we continue to utilize the airspace, moving toward UTM and all of those things, everyone who's operating in that airspace needs to be extremely knowledgeable. And I would argue probably more knowledgeable than your average vehicle operator, because of the responsibility that comes into play, because we are going to be interacting or sharing that airspace in some form or fashion with vehicles that are transporting people, whether they're manned or unmanned. So the responsibility is it's incumbent upon everyone who decides to use that airspace to really use it responsibly, and to share that amongst the community of you're now an aviator. There really is no other way to look at it. You can't say it's going to be a point at which you really hard to say, oh, well, I didn't know, because the responsibility is going to continue to grow because we're interacting with lives. I'll just reach back to, the point that Dave was making about the confidence that the community or that the public has in the drone space. We're very careful about building that confidence. And that's why Dave spoke to the kind of slow and methodical way of building our program. We spend a lot of time in earning the confidence of our manned aviation unit, or that section, our air operations. When they got to observe how we trained our pilots, how meticulous our program policy and flight operations manuals were, they were impressed. That's the only word that I can use. They had no idea that we were spending that much time in getting it right. Initially, our policy stated that anytime a manned aircraft was in the air, we had to ground the drones. But because of that relationship, because they got to see the mindset, the training, and the professionalism of our drone pilots, we were able to change that in policy. And that's why you see now the integration, or that what Dave likes to call it, that force multiplication of the airspace. We can operate that drone safely while a manned aircraft is in the air. Now, we still need to grow that relationship with our other partners, with our state and federal partners as well, so that part is standardized. But we definitely have the internal advocates now for the quality of our program, and they speak very highly. We're always looking to them for guidance and keeping them close to our program development as we expand, to make sure that they understand and approve what we choose to do with the drones. We took examples. I looked at what other programs are doing around the country as far as public outreach. That was a critical portion of our program's growth and its acceptance in making sure that one, our drones are clearly identified, our pilots are clearly identified. We publish all of our flights, whether it's through our official public-facing website. We attach what's called incident numbers to every flight that we do. We file flight plans for all the flights that we do, so that anytime that there's a question about whether that was an LAFD drone in the sky or not, we can point people directly to all of our public-facing material. Transparency was a huge part of that growth as well. So building the confidence internally, building the confidence externally for the public, and then expanding that reputation of professionalism to the drone community at large has been a large key to our success. But certainly that foundation is going to be critical for this wide adoption of the use of drones, whether it's in public safety or not. The use of that national airspace for drones is going to be critical for us as a community to take on that professionalism responsibility.
Yeah, and I think education is so key to that. I mean, back in 2015, actually, just as I was coming aboard at AUVSI, the organization launched the Know Before You Fly campaign with the Association for Model Aeronautics, who represent the hobbyists for many, many years, and the FAA. And of course, that program continues to run. But then we went further to develop our Trusted Operator program, which is still rolling out and gaining some momentum. But it was along those lines. And I think it's so important what you're doing, Dave. You mentioned the term standardization. That's kind of what we were trying to do. There were a lot of people holding out training out there, and we were trying to basically get all those trainers in rooms, say, okay, what do we all have in common here? Let's put those protocols, my term, not necessarily term of art, into a book and start start moving along the same way. But I think there's an opportunity too, and that's probably happening through drone responders and some of the other areas in public safety. You guys do training for a living. You do so many things that are so dangerous. How do you see this starting to integrate into other parts, other fire departments, other elements of public safety? Are we starting to standardize across the public safety community, if you will?
So there's a couple of things that have already happened. What's interesting about the fire service is obviously we have a long history of developing publication and guidelines throughout the different operations, the tools, the equipment that we use. So for those that are not familiar, we have NFPA, the National Fire Protective Agency's guidelines. NFPA 2400 was published, don't quote me on the date, but it was around 2018, Chief, or 2000. Yeah, I want to say 2018, 2019, where the NFPA committees all came together and developed the basic guidelines of public safety use of drone. Now, in law enforcement, they've done something similar with the police officer standards of training post. So we've all kind of been pushing towards the same goal of developing standards. The challenge for us, though, is how do they integrate out with the overall national airspace and really what the FAA desires for a safety approach and a risk mitigated approach and things like that. So our challenge for us in public safety is to really stay tuned with what the FAA would like to see, what the standards are developing, not just within the drone space, but overall manned aviation as you start seeing the integration of unmanned aircraft at all levels, from small UAS to larger package delivery, that type of thing. For us, NFPA 2400 was the start of that conversation. We had already, within LAFD, had been developing that standards approach. It was great to see that the National Institute of Standards Technology, the NIST robotics approach, the NIST test methods were adopted by NFPA. I'll be honest with you, Brian. As an aviator, initially, I was kind of like, no, that's a robotics approach. It's not really encompassing what I need as a pilot or what I would hope as a pilot. But honestly, from a basic standpoint, absence of having that flight technical training, it actually became a very solid approach, because what you're doing is taking a non-standard aviator that's training, a firefighter that's training to become aeronautically in that aeronautical mindset, and you're teaching them to be conservative in flight. Every movement has a purpose. What it does, though, is it quickly hones some skill set that gives that person the competence, the ability to perform those basic skills. Now, from that point, we can branch out into more complex flight regimes, but we're always falling back on that basic foundation.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we've taken up more time than I had originally planned, but such a rich conversation. What you're doing, obviously, is to serve your community. Every time there's a wildfire in California, I think about the hard work that you do to get ready and the even harder work that you do to keep us all safe. Thank you for that. Thank you for your professionalism, helping to move all of this forward, helping us to truly integrate. And Chief, I agree, we still got work to do. So we'll look forward to working with you and using your examples to educate others as well. Really appreciate your time today, and thanks again.
Thank you.